Welcome, friends, to another what I'm fanboying out here episode of the Cyber Mettle Podcast. We're joined today by the amazing Dr. Mike Brass. As always, my partner in crime here is Alyson Laderman. I've been a fan of Dr. Brass's for many years. As he noted prior to jumping on, it was the first time we're actually conversing. So, this podcast is already doing wonders for bucket list stuff for me on my journey. So, Alyson, do the intro as you do.
Yeah, we'll give our standard cautionary tale, right? So though Dr. Brass and Dr. Sangurima, Omar and Mike, for purpose of the podcast, are cybersecurity experts, and though I am an attorney, we are not your cybersecurity experts or lawyer for the purpose of the podcast. But we are here to share with you our experience, our wisdom that we have earned over the years from living in the trenches, so to speak, so that you don't have to make the same choices that we have, and maybe learn from some of the experiences we have had going forward. So we are very excited to have Dr. Brass on here today. He recently released a brand new book called Governance, Risk, and Compliance, and I happen to have a copy. You can get it on the website for this company or on Amazon.com. But with no further ado, Mike, we'd love for you to give a little intro so that the audience understands who you are and why they should pay attention.
Hi, obviously, Dr. Mike Brass. I work for National Highways at this point in time, which is critical national infrastructure here in the UK. We're in charge of the motorways and strategic road network. And on that note, just a clarification, nothing I said is being said on behalf of National Highways or reflects anything that National Highways is actually doing. Background, and I love giving this 30-second spiel, is actually in archaeology, PhD in archaeology. I've been doing archaeology now for 3 decades. I've been involved in other aspects of social sciences, from history, anthropology, classics, almost you bloody name it. I've had my hand involved. Also a non-tenured, and that means non-salaried staff member at University College London, to do with the Institute of Archaeology, and I co-direct a mission that's out in the Sudan when the country's not in full-scale civil war. And I bring the social science background to bear on the information security. So on that side, before anyone might be a bit irritated in hearing anything non-technical, I actually came through the traditional route in that regard. So I spent 24 years on the IT front, accumulating and being a global head of IT. I have been in cybersecurity now in various shapes and forms since 2009. I've also been a data protection officer. And at National Highways, I'm in overall charge of the governance, risk and compliance team, as well as the enterprise security architecture team, which, before anyone gets any ideas of promoting products to me, is not a technical function. We are setting standards and processes by which National Highways operates, and we have the linkages out into the various technical teams.
That's quite varied and amazing. There's a lot of people that come into cybersecurity and they think that there's only one way in, or that there's only one way of looking at it, and it's tech. And you're a great example of looking at that sociology and the archaeology type of side mixed with technology. For you, how have you seen where the two disciplines have actually worked together in your experience?
I'll give a little anecdote story. I've given this story privately a few times. I don't think I've actually said it live on air. For a substantial period of time, I was one of those people who actually thought cybersecurity was technical, was entirely a tech function. And then there was one organization I joined, not the one before Highways, the one about a month after I joined. The board had commissioned a cybersecurity review of the practices of that global organization. And that was done by the director of IT. They brought in one of the big four. And the focus, so I was in charge for the UK, EMEA region, and Australasia. The focus remained for that cybersecurity review on the UK practice, because that's where their former headquarters is, at least was in that point in time, as well as the USA, which had the substantial number of staff members and it controlled the North America out of their Farmingdale office. That report actually interests me quite greatly, being involved in that process. For various reasons, the director of IT departed from the organization, And I remember in November of that particular year, there was a couple of questions just going around the office, mainly from the finance department, because they were getting asked by the external assurer, okay, who is actually looking? We know that the report was issued, but it's now sitting in somebody's desk. I picked it up out of interest. I wanted to revisit it, some 6 months later, and just see if anything catches my fancy. Was there anything that I could simply do to help? And I got very into it, and I started seeing linkages there that was my social science background and my view that everything needs to be done holistically across an organization. And I get extremely frustrated on silos. I was seeing opportunities here if X or Y could be done. And the then CFO was actually her office was a few meters away behind my seat. And I noticed the door was open. I picked up the sheet of paper, walked into her office and said, I've got some ideas on this. A couple of minutes later, I was walking out, being in charge of the global security for the organization.
Wow.
And I started having a free hand. I love that particular punchline. But yes, as I then got involved on it and I started putting some very basic measures in place, because then it was starting from a low bar. They are much more mature these days before anyone listening gets the wrong impression.
That's nice of you. That's a beautiful, like, hey, that was then, this is now.
Exactly. So I just took it from there. The next company I was actually headhunted for, and I thoroughly enjoyed that time because it was founded by 4 people with doctorates from the University of Cambridge. Not that I actually care about where the doctorates come from, but the fact is I was thinking in terms of the mindset and where the company is operating, in terms of the thinking and the environment that's created. And it just took off from there. So that's where I was the global head of IT, global head of the information security, because I refused to call it cybersecurity by that point in time. And also the data protection officer. So I was really pulling everything together. And then after that, obviously, I'm in National Highways now.
Amazing. And that's, I think, how you and I connected even on LinkedIn, where we just kind of started chatting, was about the human impact on security and now cybersecurity, and looking at that historical lens of things we've done bad before and how we continue that just with technology. And I think that's actually how you and I started kind of chatting behind the scenes. I'm curious how much of that and that experience now plays into your governance, risk, and compliance book, where it's demystifying the risk and data privacy landscape. How does that play into your new book and the chapters?
That's the entire start of the book. In actual fact, is on the social sciences, is on the linkages. What are the linkages between that and information security or security as a whole? Because when you look at it, security as a whole, it is the cybersecurity, it's the information security, it's the personal security, and it's the physical security all coming into being. And when somebody asks, you've got seemingly 2 very diverse interests, and I say to them in response, I used to have lengthy responses. Now it's, what is information security at its most fundamental? It's human behavior. It doesn't matter how that is expressed, whether it's through bits and bytes, whether it's somebody trying to get into a building. What is it you're actually looking at beneath all of this? On the other side of the computer is another human being. On the other side of an AI bot doing some work is a human creator of that bot. And then what are the social sciences? Social sciences are looking at human behavior, whether it's criminal anthropology, whether it's anthropology by other means, whether it's archaeology. By the way, I also go into the differences. In North America, you've got archaeology as a subdiscipline of anthropology, creating a certain mindset. In the UK, you have actually got them as first cousins, creating some other mindsets, creating some other relations. But it's fundamentally human behavior at different points in time, in different kinds of contexts. You have got a lot of transferable skills when you're looking at that. That is not to diminish the requirement to have some knowledge, some technical knowledge, depending on what role you happen to be in. But this is where I see all the transferable skills. Likewise, I see many people coming through from legal, apart from yourself. There's many in National Highways who have come from various legal backgrounds, whether you're in cybersecurity data protection, whether you're in something else. I've seen people coming from some medical backgrounds, wide diverse of early talent within national highways from, I could name probably half a dozen other areas. And you need to just be able to bring them together.
How would you recommend that we start addressing that issue, right? And how do we bring them together? Because I think there's a lot of conversation of cyber is just tech and you need to see it from just that lens. And I think you make an excellent point of there are different perspectives, even from the UK and the US, as to where they put some of these different, as you pointed out, anthropology, and whether it's a cousin or it falls underneath a hierarchical type of. How do you start having those conversations with your organization to get that wider lens and that scope of how the interdisciplinary areas work together?
To some extent, that actually depends upon the company and the size of the company. If the organization has the resources available, it's a lot easier. I'm talking in terms of the financial resources, but it has to be aligned with, does the company actually have some kind of a social mission? Does it have an interest in development, or is it a fast-paced startup where you're needing people to come in and you're needing people to hit the ground? What stage in their particular development? I'm kind of lucky at National Highways because it's an arm's length body. It's funded by government, but it's not part of government. We have our own governance processes. We align with government, the government missions, social responsibility, and everything. So it's built into the DNA of the organization. That is a completely different story if you're saying you're sitting with a 30-person band, one organization over there producing that particular product and they're needing to get it out the door. It's also a very different situation if you're talking with, say, a 50-person think tank that has been well established for a number of years, has some secure funding, and is able to generate an apprenticeship pipeline through into there. Obviously, even such a thing with that pipeline can get stagnated at different points, but that depends on who's doing the hiring, who's in charge of the organization, a bunch of things. What I'm a big fan of in starting off, and it's relatively big in the UK, is the actual apprenticeship schemes, the cyber apprenticeship schemes. You have people come in from more disadvantaged backgrounds. Yes, you can have people from advantaged backgrounds. It's a way to get into the industry instead of, I need to do A+, I need to do Network+, I need to do Security+. I'm holding the trifecta and demanding a job or sending your CV with no practical experience out to 300 organizations. The stories we see time and time again on LinkedIn. There are mechanisms available here in the UK. There are mechanisms available on the continental Europe, not to the same extent in the UK, because the UK is the largest in terms of the cybersecurity. I was going to use the word bull, but in terms of the revenue, in terms of the size, it is the largest still in Europe. There are places in the US, as you guys already know, where you can have these apprenticeship programs by other means. Whenever I get approached, I'm advising people to look into such apprenticeship programs.
I would love to talk more about the apprenticeship part for a second, because this is something Omar and I have talked about a lot recently, especially here in the United States. We are seeing a complete erosion of entry-level job opportunities. And for the colleges and universities here in the States, if they're lucky, they're connecting in with some businesses in the community where there are some internship ability, where the students might work for a small project here and there, or 3 months or 6 months at most. But job postings are looking for a minimum of 3 years experience. In the UK, how does that apprenticeship program work? What kind of is that timeline? Is it while people are in school? Is it after? I know, for example, and it's been a long time, but when I was at the University College London for law school for a summer, we got to go study a bit about the UK solicitors program and how the entire year you spend in the courtroom, that is part of your education, is actually doing the job, which of course we don't do in the States, but I'm a big proponent that we should be doing the job as a lawyer, is not dissimilar to the hands-on skills and that training necessary, like in cybersecurity and security areas. So I'm curious on this particular side of the, not saying it right, but for cybersecurity apprenticeships, what does that look like in the UK? When does that come to fruition for somebody who wants to be part of that? And what is the extent of those types of programs that you've seen?
So I was also, until recently, I was an external assessor for it used to be called the British Computer Society. It's BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. And they're one of the marking bodies for people who go through the various apprenticeship programs. There are different layers to it. So you would start off, let's say, as a level 2. That is the real basics. You can choose whether it's cybersecurity. You can do a generalist thing. You could do a little bit more specific within it. You could do the IT one, which is very, very basic, but actually gives people a lot of the fundamentals. In terms of that could be about a year to 18 months between the time of actually starting and passing and receiving the pass from the different assessments that you have to complete after the stage gate. Then you go into level 4. And there's a number of things on there that's also very diverse. That can easily last a couple of years getting through that. Okay. It's typically around 2 years plus some extra time with the post-gateway assessments. And that's when the likes of me used to be brought in for all of that. Beyond that is you're getting into more university level stuff. So if you're going on to level 5, level 6, for example, or the equivalent thereof, you're really talking about something that has been offered through university rather than through a training provider. Before anyone gets annoyed at me listening to this, I'm speaking in general terms here. I'm not speaking about any specific type of course offered by any specific training provider. So I'm helping actually through National Highways to do I'm inputting my own views into the development of one of the courses that might actually be offered by another institution at a higher education level. So though I've been out of that now for probably about 6 months, I've still had a few years of familiarity with how it goes. I definitely strongly encourage anybody, particularly here in the UK, starting out to look at, say, QA's page, Firebrand's page, SDO's page, and there's a number of others. I'm just throwing them off the top of my head.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding. So it sounds like you can do the apprenticeship before you go to higher education in this particular field in the UK in some areas, generally speaking.
Correct. You can use it as a baseline. You can stop whenever you want. During the apprenticeship, obviously, you are employed by an organization, and part of your responsibility is to be looking at the pages for organizations saying, we want an apprentice, and you're applying. There is an application process, so all of that jazz. I've seen some extremely good people coming through the apprenticeship pathways and getting promotions then within the company. The company is actually wanting to keep them. It can range from very large national companies to local schools. There's a whole wide range of organizations that participate. And
that's
then, yes,
wonderful.
if you want to go on in university, that's entirely your decision between you and your company.
See, we're seeing kind of a flip-flop here, right? Well, not even a flip-flop. We're seeing kind of the opposite in some extent. And I think Omar can comment on this probably a bit more. We're seeing over in the US that companies are not wanting to train, and they're not wanting to offer those paid apprenticeship learning opportunities. And I think it's at a disservice both to the organizations and to the individuals. As you pointed out, some people may not need university in these areas because they have the skills. It's a different world. They've grown up, with different resources. I mean, pretty much kids are handed I've seen them with babies with iPhones in their hands, right, at theme parks these days, and anywhere else in the grocery store. And so it's a different world to where some of this is really hands-on and practical, but we're still seeing in the States where, we want a degree, we want 3 years experience, and we want the certs and it's a whole list before you can even get in the door for your first potential job. And again, the entry-level jobs don't even exist. And it sounds like you guys have the opportunity that you can come in and you can get a paid job at a real true entry level, whether or not you have university background, and learn on the job what you need to at least start that process and then decide if it's for you, what pathway you want to go through, and then to be able to skill up from there.
We have the additional avenue available. It's not readily known, which is the unfortunate, but when you're taking the ratio of the people who are going through the apprenticeships versus the people who are actually looking for jobs. And the amount of people who sadly don't know that they should divert some of their attention across and just investigate that is extremely high. We do have the same problem where companies are looking for the mythical unicorn, or at least wanting a senior person at a junior salary level. That exists all the way around. It exists throughout Europe.
Yeah.
It exists all around the world. Unfortunately, there's just no getting away from it. I think it is entirely the responsibility of the senior leaders in an organization to at least attempt to create the environment to bring in people with diversity of thought.
Oh, let's expand on that if you don't mind. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. There's a lot of, I can say, organizations where we see a very, we'll say, homogenous look of the cyber experts. And from your experience, both, on your apology side as well as your cyber side, why is it important for businesses to really consider that diversity of thought and experience when they're talking about security measures, whether it's physical, technology, or otherwise, for their organization?
If I'm sitting with a project at the coalface, no, I'm going to stop myself there. Let me just explain a bit more about the structures that have been involved in. So, for example, in previous organization, it is a company that developed hardware, developed software solutions that went out into German automobile industries, other critical national infrastructure industries. In a case like that, if you bring in somebody new on board, you are going to be looking for them to have a very good technical understanding. You also, and it was a company of about 77 people at that point in time. So you're also looking to develop their soft skills, their communication skills. And there was one person in particular, and I had to work quite a bit with him on how to engage with the rest of the organization. So I'll come back onto that point in a little bit. For national highways, when you're in that much larger organization, you're much more further removed. You have done your time at the coalface, you've done this, you've done that. Then if you're sitting as head of GRC, you're looking for specific skill sets there. Risk analysts, you're looking for very specific skills there. Does a risk analyst need to know how to configure a cloud environment in terms of hands-on? No. And immediately there's going to be a listener or two who's going to completely and utterly disagree with me on that. What they need to know is they need to understand the concepts. They need to understand and I call them buckets, what they are looking at. They need to know the right questions, what to ask. So they do need cloud exposure. Do they need to know how they have gone and configured Kubernetes or a particular container in depth? No, because in GRC, you're sitting as second line of defense. You are doing a validation of risk data that has been received from first line. That first line can be, yes, the service owners, can be people who are actually operating it. It is also, after it's passed through a first line validation of people who do have those technical skills. So in this case, my ESA team, my enterprise security architecture team, is composed of that ESA team is divided even further. You've got a management layer that's sitting there, people who have come through the ranks, who have got certain skill sets, who have been there, who have seen it all. Then you have, let's say, project security architects. You have operational security architects. And those project level architects are going to have a good dose of technical knowledge. The operational security architects, that is really where you're getting into the absolute nitty-gritty of everything. So if a service is being evaluated, for example, it'll be done at the coalface. You'll have the first line of assurance also being done by security architects at the coalface or one step removed, including that validation. It then gets taken and it gets passed through to the GRC environment. And that is why should the GRC risk analyst be redoing the work of the first line of defense people? That's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to see if there has been methodological holes. Is there something in the data that's missing, to actually do analysis on all of this data that is coming in and align it throughout to what the business priorities, what the risk priorities are for the GRC What are the strategic priorities for the security function as a whole? There's a bunch of other things that they are doing. And this actually comes back, Alyson, to a point that when you were mentioning earlier to do with GRC engineering. And that is actually, that was the point of a disagreement that I had with somebody on LinkedIn. I get the point of the GRC engineering. I get the point of automating collection, and I get GRC engineering being valid in certain types of companies, in certain sizes of companies, in some larger companies, but it's all dependent as well as on how security is actually structured and divided within that organization. Would GRC engineering be particularly valid for my GRC? Questionable, because I'm taking it down one level and I'm putting a lot of that into the enterprise security architecture. So it's not about whether the automated collection of evidence is valid. It's about who is doing it, why is it being done, and avoiding a misconception then that just because you've got some GRC automation in place, that means you've got a smaller GRC team, that means you can axe different roles, and there's a bunch of other things that come into play. So I start looking at it from that perspective. Who actually needs to be doing X? Who needs to be doing Y? Is it first line of defense? Is it architecture? Is it this? Is it that? Or is it actually you need to go away and better define what your second and third line of defenses are within your organization and stop confusing that first line with the second line of defense? That was one thing that I had to get sorted out straight away when I took over the GRC function at National Highways, which is no criticism of my predecessor on there. It was an evolutionary journey that the security was going through at that point in time. And I'd been on it with my ESA team. Now I was in charge of both teams. I could take that holistic picture and I could tease it apart. I don't know if I answered the question. I've been prattling on for a few minutes.
No, I think that was great. And I was actually going to have Omar jump into this on the GRC thing, because as you're talking about evolution, and this was something we talked about pre-show just kind of briefly, right? There has been an evolution recently and is still ongoing, I think, as it's evolving presently, as to GRC, what it means, the way that it functions. I think there's been that traditional notion of, it's a
You've cut out.
checkbox, and some of the...
So you cut out from my side for a few seconds.
Oh, all right.
I can hear you now.
We'll go back there for a second. So what I was saying is, I think you answered the question as to why that diversity of thought and the way to look at the different pictures so you can get that holistic view. And as you mentioned earlier, a big part of that is knowing your organization and your organization's needs, and then bringing in the different experiences and levels and being able to talk intelligently, even if you can't do the coding yourself, at least knowing the questions to ask and the way the things piece together. And so to kind of jump into that GRC piece, which goes into the heart of your book and the conversations you've obviously had on LinkedIn, and I know that we have had respectively on LinkedIn as well, and that Omar does all the time, there is that evolution now of GRC that is ongoing. There's been that traditional approach of, GRC is just checking the compliance boxes. And now there's versions of automation of, we'll write the policy. But is that enough? I think we can all agree collectively that is not enough. As Omar laughs. And that's why I want to bring Omar into this conversation, because I've prattled on a lot today. But so you guys can talk intelligently about that evolution of GRC, what we are seeing in this space, and really where it needs to be going for businesses to really understand what GRC is and what GRC isn't. And how to get a most out of that particular part of that full picture of security for your organization.
I mean, I love, Mike, where you're making the distinction, and why I've been a fan of yours for so long is like you re-inject nuance and just, again, you're exact with the concepts, or you try to be as much as you can, but like without being pedantic, right? And I think on the internet, folks just get riled at that, right? Nuance on the internet, oh God, right? Like there's no, and so that's why I think you get folks riled. But it's the piece that you mentioned here where, listen, you're not necessarily saying that what people beating the GRC engineering drum are saying needs to happen, shouldn't happen. Right? You're just going back to, listen, let's go back to first principles. Like, GRC as a whole never said that didn't need to happen. right? We're just saying
Correct.
you brought in the lines of defense model, which I would argue, I think not with you, alongside you here, is still where you're gonna grab, depending on the context and the size of the business, the resources, as you say. I think you're still gonna grab more friends outside of even like the security function, right? If you're GRC engineering, I feel, again, it's a good conversation to have. It's what you need. There's good things there, but then you're still going to alienate pieces of the business that are more familiar with that 3 lines of defense model that you're saying, right? Like your internal audit function, enterprise risk management's going to still be like, okay, weirdos are talking tech over there. I don't know. Like they're making hard faces again. They're wearing hoodies again. Like and what I love is that you're not saying no. You're just saying, wait a second, we've been talking about this. Now we're just calling it something else. Like the point is to make sure it gets done. Make sure you're asking those questions and also maximizing the use of resources, right? Like if you have a GRC person and you're trying to fit them into like a square peg and they're a round GRC person, like you're going to run into problems, no?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of making sure the GRC team is effectively flattened out. So people, yes, you will have more expertise in one particular area, but you are able to move between areas and all of this. I'm a big fan of optimizing how the value that people can offer. So if there is a way to use automation to make your role a lot easier, absolutely, because then I can get you to refocus and ask yourself, how are you talking with the other arms of the business? How are you actually offering value to that other stakeholder? And it's asking them, how can you help them to make their job more effective? How can you help them to align with the company's policies, the governance processes, and all the regulations that they need to follow? The other poor person could be sitting with millions of pounds worth of cuts, or could be having a nice budgetary increase there and saying, actually, I'm about to hire somebody else. This talk is very timely because I can help optimize my processes, and it suits both parties. So just a couple of things. And when I was at an expo a few months ago, I was just wandering around it and I saw one stand which said AI and GRC. And it gave the impression that the GRC can be automated through AI in terms of being able to downscale the GRC and have a lot of it just done by AI work. So a bit annoyed at what the messaging that was being conveyed. I went up to the poor sod, and I say this with the greatest affection, and I said, what does this mean? How is this actually operating? And he spoke to me, and I said, okay, I'm going to summarize the last 5 minutes of what you've said to me. You're saying you're deploying different agents into X, into Y. There, you're doing automated data collection. You're doing nothing to do with the analysis. You're relying on the people to obviously have helped program. So you are in effect operating an informed, enhanced version of early machine learning and collecting this information. So why are you calling it AI? And I went and made myself extremely popular there. But it's to
Sorry.
it's to voice the frustrations and the messaging that is being conveyed. This is not to knock some of the great companies out there, some of which very well known to the listeners who are doing the work, who are not conveying the messaging incorrectly, who recognize you're needing the humans in the loop, who are recognizing that this is a tool. But my whole point on all of that is everybody should actually just take one little step back and rethink, what does GRC need to be at its core? Ultimately, on that, what's the fundamentals? While there are going to be some listeners who are coming in and needing to set up a GRC team from scratch, there are also going to be a number of people who are either part of an existing GRC team or going to take over an existing GRC team and who need to take it on an evolutionary journey. So a couple of the things then that I then engage with to really take GRC back to the core of what it is and its second line of defense. Whether you use that old label or whether you use the new label, it is still a second line. And that is to engage the people on the team to understand what is the current situation. You are needing to go and define the purpose and the scope of the GRC in the context of your organization. You need to identify and group what is the actual core GRC functions. So you have the function descriptions. You then need to be taking that. You're needing to define the GRC responsibilities. You're needing to look at the core and remediation tasks. You're needing to document the stakeholder inputs, outputs, strategic requirements. All of that then feeds into what is an actual GRC function description. Part of the outputs of that is you've got a list of GRC responsibilities, catalog of core and remedial tasks. You have got function stakeholder mind maps. You then also need to be deciding where do you want to take the GRC in the future. So you've got to plan out a transition plan. You've got to look at the proposed organizational design, not just for the GRC. You're looking at it within the security function as a whole. You're looking at it within your organization, however it's defined, whether it's directorates, whether you've got other towers who report into what is the overall mission of your organization. You're looking obviously at the role descriptions, the skills required, the RACI matrix, priority tasks, how you're putting in that transition plan into play. How is this feeding into any evolution that your organization is going to go through? What are the priority tasks? How do you assess the effectiveness of this particular model? All of that is well over and above having AI agents in play, collecting data from your cloud environment. What else are you doing?
And what I love here, and I'm having a smile because A, just love talking to you, right? Finally, but then B, reminding me a lot of my boss at my 9 to 5. Like in terms of there's just a ton of pieces where AI still isn't there yet. In terms of looking at, as you keep saying, right, like the holistic context of what the org needs, and understanding that could change. Could be some drift, there could be some transformation, but it's still on that GRC function and definitely the leadership within it to continuously be looking at, is this still the best fit? And again, all of what you said right towards the end, I don't hear anything there yet. Again, I'll make that caveat that AI can just take over, right? That AI can just take over. Right. But that's what's being sold. Right?
Marketing.
Absolutely.
Improper marketing.
You've got to have an AI governance process in place. You've got to have an AI security assurance framework in place. You've got to have an AI security controls framework in place. And there's no excuse these days. You've got things from ISACA, the ISM certification where people can learn some basics. You've got ISO and one. You've got things coming from
the IAPP,
CISA,
right? The AIG.
You've got from that one I was about to mention. The CISA, the CSA Cloud Security Alliance has put out some absolute great stuff as well. NIST has got the AI risk management framework as well, which dovetails very nicely with 42001. There's no lack of knowledge out there.
And there's no excuse. You were going to say there's no excuse. I heard the E, man, right? Because you have to share some of the frustration where it's like, I want to take a tangent real quick because I got you, right? Like finally here. Is it similar to what you saw in cloud? Like when cloud was coming where like cart was well before the horse and everyone was going nuts but the security assurance, all the functions you just listed were like trying to catch up to the tech? Is it similar or is it different or am I off?
Sadly, I'm spent a couple of seconds wishing I could disagree with you. I can't. The frustration is because my view is there's not a lot of difference between doing security assurance work correctly and doing AI security assurance work correctly. Yes, you've got to, if you have a a controls framework. So actually, I'll go even one step further back. You would have a separate AI governance process in place, framework. But in lieu of that, if you don't have it, you can actually utilize your existing governance processes temporarily. The AI governance piece actually needs to be an extension of your existing governance. So it hooks into it. It just expands it. It's just another element that people have been unprepared for. And they don't actually realize to what degree these two can actually and should interlock. In terms of the controls, I think some people and techies, at least on LinkedIn, are quite guilty of this. You have multiple layers for the AI controls. Absolutely, you have the baseline things that should just get put in right down there and then. But in what framework do they operate? In what controls framework they operate? A controls framework doesn't go and say, you have to be doing this by that method, by that method. So to take the UK example, I easily use this. NCSC for the National Cyber Centre. Its CAF version 4 was released fairly recently. That's an assurance framework. It's a cybersecurity assurance framework. You can actually take that and use it as a controls framework, as a baseline for a security controls framework. So what do I mean by that? Within the CAF, you've got the principles, you've got the objectives, you've got whether it hasn't been achieved, and I'm going to use the words partially achieved or fully achieved because it's a bit more easily understandable than the wording that some others will use. And if you're going into the likes of, say, government supply chains, and I'm just going to pick on them, or any critical national infrastructure supply chains, particularly in the UK, they will understand what the CAF is. If you go and say to them, as part of the contract, we require you to align to our security controls framework, it's based upon the CAF. They go, CAF, excellent. We have lots of experience of it. What is it exactly you're requiring? That's a very different conversation. So if you've gone to them and say, for your risk profile, we require you to be in the partially achieved column. Likewise, I could be saying to them, you need to be fully achieved. Fine, whatever. Potatoes. Then it's, what do you need us? The conversation switches to, what do you need us to do to be the partially achieved? And with underneath that, that's where you list the control outcomes. Very, very different. You list in the control outcomes that you are needing. And those controls, yes, they could be NIST controls, ISO 27001 controls. You could draw upon whatever you want for your particular organization. And they will see this, okay, maybe that's not applicable to us, but that's part of the risk assessment, whether it is applicable to that particular outcome to your organization or not. Yes, exactly. Or part of the usual processes. But again, that's usual processes. That's what a company is used to. Then they take that and it becomes an even more productive conversation. Okay, guys, what do you need us to do to achieve those particular partial outcomes for that project? We think it is X or Y. What do you guys in, let's say, in the operations center or people under a chief technology officer, etc., you name it, doesn't matter. And that is a very productive conversation because you're agreeing on the outcomes that need to be met. You've got your organization and the other organization completely aligned. That is already creating and generating some goodwill. Now, what happens with the AI? So the CAF, for example, covers a little bit of AI, not too much. But you can go out to the 2001 controls. You can go out to the CSA controls, etc. Again, from an outcomes point of view, and you augment your existing controls framework with those outcomes-based controls framework with the outcomes then that you're expecting for the AI. And again, a couple of the high-level controls. There, you've got your framework, which can feed into assurance framework. Then the techies can go away to your heart's delight, and you will have the ever-changing, ever-increasing framework of controls that you need to be implemented in your specific type of products that your organization is either producing or consuming.
Mhm.
And when you do it that way, it is much more productive. You've got the executives on board, you've got the senior directors on board, you've got product support people on board, and done correctly, everyone will know what their particular responsibilities are in theory.
You've done the translation. And again, like all that you're saying, I keep hearing, A, I'm a fan, right? But then B, again, I don't see stuff on the AI market that can do and have those conversations quite yet that you're saying you should have, and how you should be engaging different stakeholders within the organization, potential partners, OGs and the C-suite, et cetera. So back to, and I just chuckled when you said, I stormed up to the guy and asked him to define this to me. I just picture you like mad at a conference, man. It's not something like me at a booth. I wouldn't want. I'm like, I don't want their smoke. I'm going on break. But like, it's just. But it's true that there's, but I think like Alyson said, right? And I want to kick it over. Like that marketing is so strong where it's almost like folks feel as though they have to say, this, this pooper scooper, but now with AI, and then suddenly it'll sell more, right? But there's why, right? It's not glamorous. I wish a robot would do it for me. I'm not saying that. I don't enjoy that for those that do. Not kink shaming, but there's weird. So everything now has to get infused, but it feels very cloud. It feels very like IoT, right? When that stuff was really exploding, where we have to do it. We don't know the implications of it. We don't even know if it's a fit for what we're trying to do as an organization. But F it, we have to because our competitors are, or the market feels that we have to, or we're going to be an old stodgy company unless we say that we've AI'd the heck out of everything that we're doing here. And I think that's where it leaves us. Even now, it's injecting itself into our beloved corner of the world, which is GRC.
But to Mike's point earlier, right? Automation, a lot of this is just old automation that already existed before AI.
Yep.
And people aren't paying enough attention to go, I just had this conversation the other day. You already have a lot of the tools available, already Copilot aside, built into basic Office, Outlook, certain things.
Sure.
I've been using those and teaching those since 2010, well before GPT hit the market of here's how you use the tools most effectively. And now it just has a fancier cover to it, but it's doing a lot of the same aggregation, auto forward. Like so many automations were already there. And for companies, Omar, to your point, that just see the shiny marketing piece of it of, I need to have the new toy, realizing it's the old toy, but with the new wrapping. There are things that do differently, but there's a lot that is exactly what you already had. You just weren't using it. And now you get to pay the privilege of paying more because you didn't understand what you already had. And you don't understand what genie you've just let out of the bottle, because to have the new toy, right, you've got those other security features and other things that you're giving up in privacy and data. And all of those things that we talk about all the time. I just saw the cute new little email from Google the other day, and all the new things that, and we're training on this, and on third party vendor models. And if you're not reading it carefully and you're not paying attention, Gemini seems like a great idea until you realize, well, now everybody's got everything you've got. And I'm like, I don't think I need everybody reading my emails or my documents.
That's exactly why you need
organization.
Yeah. That's exactly why you need a proper governance process in place to begin with, and always ask why. Is this absolutely necessary? What are you trying to achieve? While at the same time being very cognizant of what are the actual moves out there in the market. Because somebody could very easily have thought of something that will actually benefit your organization entirely, that is a value add, that is AI. Then it's, well, how do you want to take advantage of that? Not just you want to copy your arch rival competitor, but surely you don't want to just move up to their particular level. Surely you want to do something that actually distinguishes you from whatever their offering happens to be. If it's an offering on a factory floor, well, how are you going to optimize the processes on that factory floor linking into their ERM system? How are you going to do all these other things and take advantage of 5G, for example, within it? Where's the data residency? You've got to ask a bunch of questions. It's not just about something that is a nice, shiny, lovely new toy. And on that note, companies obviously, as new products, and I'm going to pick on Adobe just because I bloomin' well can. They went and released their AI into the Adobe Reader, for example.
Yeah.
And the moment that was realized, I had got a call from somebody, for example, do you realize that has actually now been formally released in this particular version? What does this mean for the organization?
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a question if, well, you can't exactly opt out of it. Well, you can by preventing upgrades with all the consequences that fall down
and then
down
you
the
go
line.
down a bad, it's not patched path, right? So it's
Right.
Yep. You can go off into a number of other avenues. So immediately some time obviously gets spent in reading the Adobe documentation and doing some verification work that Adobe is saying, well, it'll be segmented, privately stored. It'll be on this residence over there if you're using it, even though public. Then you have to weigh up the risks. If you've got, let's say, a strictly confidential document that you've been opening on here and you take advantage of the prompt, what is the risk appetite for that going out? Or do you use another PDF reader? What is this going backwards and forwards? It's at that kind of level. It's also the kind of level if you're a critical national infrastructure company, you're applying firmware update to a product. Let's say it's going to be in 3 or 4 years' time you're applying. What's the verification process that you are doing against that firmware to make sure that no AI is actually being stuck in? And if there is some AI, and it's only meant to be doing X or Y, how have you done the validation to make sure it's only going to be doing X or Y and it's not going to be going off and making a decision on its own, shutting down that part of the network, which good luck if it is actually critical or not a critical part of the network, and how are you going to know about it? So it's people who sit in our seats are fully aware of a lot of things that it's beyond the co-pilot. But you've got to just put that governance in place, and you've got to have the audit capabilities. ISACA's released an AI audit kit for example. Just take a look and expand your capabilities.
And this is, and what it strikes me in the way you said it, I'm going to give you credit here. Take it, all right? Like, because I think you planted the seeds on purpose. We're in a field that's still, a lot of us are not Petya. So it's not really beyond the realm of, wait a second, this is something that popped off inside of this random little side application that you wouldn't think could be patient zero for a worldwide crisis across the cyber realm. But this happens all the time. So with the advent and the acceleration of injecting AI into these products, and folks, to Alyson's points, and you mentioned it as well, not sitting there and poring over what you're agreeing to or what they're saying they're doing, on top of the fact that a lot of it, and I was, kind of pantomiming the thumbs up and the air quotes, because there's a lot of stuff that a lot of companies tell you, hey, we promise we're going to keep it here, and I promise it's going to be its own tenant. And you can sit back and go, and I'm not saying this to Adobe. I don't want to get sued by Adobe. I have a lawyer friend, and she tells me I got to be a little more exact with some of my bombast here. But you have companies potentially where the business model behooves them to be lying to you about this. Where why wouldn't they want to train on all of part of the whole reason why they're going to do the expense of injecting the AI here? Sure, there's going to be use cases for consumers, but at the upstream, to Alyson's point, Gemini is going to want to train on all that data. It's going to naturally be inclined. Adobe, same thing, I would imagine. Again, allegedly, I don't think they're, I'll take them at their word. But how do you, just to kind of wrap it up here, right? Like, because I know it's been a long day for you, Mike. Where do you stand on, again, like, is it just having proper processes and running it through? Is there anything we can do on our side, maybe outside of automation, to kind of keep pace with all of this? What's your take there? That's the one thing I really wanted to ask you.
In what sense do you mean by keeping pace?
I feel as though...
How are you defining that?
I want to say, in here, again, the nuance, right? Like, I love you. I feel as though that there was already a procurement is going to be throwing, I already feel like Lucille Ball on the conveyor belt
Sorry.
like with the chocolate, like already in general, I personally, and then as well, I think maybe my compatriots in the field feel like, stuffing it in the hat down here, throwing it over your shoulder. I already feel that there's that aspect of things. Now, I think that the iterations on the tech side and the product side are only going to accelerate, right? I don't think necessarily it's accelerating into like the right things. Again, a lot of time I've spent here saying AI is not there yet. AI is not there yet. I've meant the yet because I feel like the boulder is gaining steam, but it seems as though stuff is already too fast for the second and third line of defense in a lot of cases. Is there any hope? Is there what would you say we should focus on in order just to maybe, instead of being the fastest defender, playing the angle, say, and cutting off the nefarious goal scoring in another way? What would you, is there, what's your thoughts there?
Don't think that is actually where GRC, when I'm going to caveat my words. If you're talking about an organization which has the financial resources and the organizational will to have those particular three lines, I do strongly encourage there to actually be an enterprise security architecture team that will be under an IT security team. When you're looking at it, you're talking about embedding security within the enterprise architecture. And by architecture, you're talking about the structure of the business, not of which the digital architecture is but one element of it. And I think what you, Omar, are describing in that kind of situation, actually the responsibility of it resides in the ESA team. It's their responsibility to keep on top of those particular types of trends. And it's their responsibility to be talking with the operations people, with people under CTO, Chief Marketing Officer, all arms, including the IT, and to equip them with the necessary knowledge of what is it that the organization's requiring you to look out for, and also to take that information back from the technical experts and be writing them into the standards, be writing them into the processes, which would feed right back in to the people there at the core face. So a person who has had that hands-on experience with AI, who can help feed. And then I think it's a few tweaks on when you have that kind of structure, it's a few tweaks on the GRC side to be saying, these are the types of data that we are looking for evidence of compliance. These are the types of governance processes we're looking for when we are part of security working groups, when we're having those broader second line of defense discussions. That's a very different type of story to when you're in another organization where you don't have the ESA, or effectively the ESA is taken and it's split out between IT, between this other part of security, between this other part of digital and the GRC function. And that is where, yes, you would effectively see a fourth arm within GRC, which is that GRC engineering. But I also think in terms of that, you are needing a mix between the GRC engineers, who would need to be highly technical in that respect, and IT people who know that AI inside out. And I'm going to caveat that even further by saying, do not only look at the AI from the IT perspective, pull in everybody from your data office, pull in everybody from HR, pull in everybody from legal, but in particular the data office. So the chances are the overall responsibility for the AI isn't going to reside in security. It's not going to reside in IT. It's going to reside in the data office. And very correctly so.
Sure.
That's my point of view.
I mean, that holistic viewpoints throughout. You're as advertised, Dr. Mike. And also I love your constant going back to have those two-way conversations. Build it, but then continuously have that communication, anti-silo all day. Right, you said it, and again, you walk the talk. Alyson, I don't know if you had any closing statements here. I'm going to listen back to this repeatedly, man. It's just this is
you
great
know
stuff.
A lot of the stuff yourself.
Hey, but I don't know. There's some conversations where it's what you need to hear in your life at that certain point of time. I I don't know if I've started to look less tired as the conversation's gone through, because my heart needed to hear this stuff. So, I wanted to say from my perspective, thank you for coming on, Alyson. I don't know if you had any closing thoughts.
No, I beyond thrilled, Dr. Brass, for you to be here today and to share all of that with us. Just the last thought on my end for business leaders that maybe aren't as technical and don't understand, I would just say when you're talking with your team, go back to the journalism, who, what, when, where, why, and how, and ask those questions as you're going through the technology pieces, even if you don't understand the highly complex tech talk, but you want to understand the basics. Ask your team those fundamental questions, right? Who's going to be using it? What's going on? Why? How? Where? Not just how much, right? You really need to understand that full gamut of the questions and that full holistic picture of what's going on so that you can make that informed business decision for your organization that aligns with legal, that aligns with your data team, that aligns with the IT side, that aligns with your end users, right? And your clients or customers, depending on the nature of your business. And so be inquisitive, ask those questions. Remaining silent and just going, yeah, let them talk isn't going to help you make an informed decision. You've got those resources there. And if you don't understand something, ask for that clarification. I think that business will be able to give that to you when you're talking to someone as brilliant as Mike or Omar. Because there are definitely times where I'm like, I get it, but I don't quite get all that, right? So I'd want to ask follow-up questions in a leader in that position to be able to get that picture, draw me some images. So that is my only thought. But Mike, thank you so much. And I pointed to the book earlier.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
I pointed to the book earlier, forgetting we're also audio. So this is actually published by GRC Press, Taylor and Francis Group. So you can find, again, Governance, Risk, and Compliance, both on their website as well as at Amazon.com for anybody who's interested. Don't worry, it is not a huge read, but it is in-depth and useful and definitely worth checking out for Dr. Mike. And I'm sure you don't mind other people joining the conversation with you on LinkedIn so they can find you also
Absolutely.
on LinkedIn as we have. So thank you again. And I'll leave it to Omar to wrap up.
Dr. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. Again,
thank you for having me.
Bucket list thing checked off. Hope this is not the one and done. I hope we can continue the conversation. I mean, hell, I'm thinking of heading over to your neck of the woods here for one of those expos so we could bum rush booths together. I like that smoke if I'm on the right side of the argument. So I'm a fan of that. Thank you so much. And as always, everyone, we'll be back soon. Keep it cyber metal. Take care.
And yes.